Do you feel at times that you're putting in so much effort to turn your life around, to bring in the changes you so desire, and yet no matter how much effort you seem to be putting in, it's just not shifting? Today, we're going to look at why more effort, more doing does not necessarily equate to change. So in today's video, we're continuing in the series I've created around why making change can be so hard for so many of us. And so if you haven't caught any of my other videos, it might be helpful to go back and check some of the others that also add a bit more detail around the challenges that come from change. They all overlap in some kind of way. So today's video will overlap with some of the others, but hone in on a few key points that I haven't brought up in the previous videos. And it's around the doing, the effort. And I think a lot of us get caught in this trap of, I've just got to push harder, I've just got to do more, and I will shift this pattern. I will be able to make the breakthrough, to be able to create this shift that I've been craving for so long. And for example, let's say you're struggling with anxiety, one of the most common, afflictions we as humans are affected by. And you might not even consider yourself to be a highly anxious person, but so many of us, just in the world we live in, are affected by stress. So even some level of anxiety is bound to catch up with many of us at some point in our lives. And so let's say you're noticing you've got a lot of anxiety, so you decide, I'm going to throw everything at this. You start watching lots of podcasts, you read lots of books, you go to lots of retreats, you even do lots of therapy and do a lot of talking around it. And not that psychological therapies don't have their place, but certainly if there's just a lot of talk around the problem, I question sometimes whether it is actually having the impact that we wish it to have. And so all this effort is going in, and you just keep going and going, expecting something to shift, and it just doesn't. You just find yourself defaulting back to certain patterns or certain aspects just seem to keep recurring and repeating in your life around the area you're trying to work on, such as anxiety. And one thing I want to say about that today is that the effort is perhaps going into the wrong areas. One of my other videos in this series, I spoke to gathering knowledge, just understanding more and more about yourself, and I guess that overlaps with what I'm saying here about more and more doing. The podcasts, the therapy, it's got more of a doing element. Even affirmations and positive thinking cannot necessarily land the more that we do them. And it's my sense that the doing is just being, or the effort is being placed in the wrong areas. And it's because, as I refer to in many of my videos, that the subconscious is the driver for the patterns that you're seeking to change and struggling to change. And so the iceberg metaphor is a beautiful and simple one for a lot of us, just to think of the fact that the conscious mind, where our effort is driven by making plans, coming up with schedules, coming up with things to do to try to overcome the challenges that we're facing. Yet that tip of the iceberg, where the analytical mind, the logical mind, and the doing is generated from, will not override what's going on underneath the iceberg. And so if there are unconscious belief patterns or parts of you that hold certain beliefs about your safety in the world or what is okay for you to do or be in the world, then that is going to override any frantic efforts at doing. Because once we drop our guard slightly and aren't completely switched on, maybe completely in a mindful state, our default or our autopilot just naturally takes over. We need a default or an autopilot, otherwise we'd struggle in the world. We had to think about every footstep we took, every breath we took. We wouldn't be able to do anything else. We just have to focus on breathing and walking. So that default is there running all of these behaviors that get us around in the world. But they're also running our automatic ways of relating to people, relating to ourselves, and they're not easily overridden just through effort. And so the real issue here is that the effort is just being placed in the wrong areas through lots of tip of the iceberg activities. Whereas if the effort can be placed in this subconscious work and working with different parts of your psyche that are protective or carrying wounded aspects, in my personal experience and professional experience, can lead to far greater changes than any number of strategies and understandings about oneself. I'm not dismissing the understandings, and knowing oneself is an important starting point to then go further, because understanding is only the start. The real change happens when we can bring curiosity and compassion to help this underlying programming and the wounds that have been created from our past that don't have to be necessarily hugely significant. So if you're someone that's listening to this thinking, I've had a pretty good life, I don't have any big wounds, I would be very surprised, unless you've done all of the work on yourself already, then you're probably not drawn to watching this video. But if you're watching this video, then perhaps it's because you know you haven't been able to bring about the change that you really desire. So the work, and I repeat myself ad nauseum on these videos around my preferred model, the internal family systems model, to do this kind of work. I just haven't come across anything else that can bring about the kinds of changes that this approach can, in a respectful way. There are other modalities that can do very similar things, but I just have a personal preference, and I think you'll find if you look around, a lot of others sing the praises of this approach. Maybe not for everything, but for a lot of the challenges that we face within our habits, our emotions, our thinking patterns, etc. It does a pretty good job if you've got someone guiding you in how to do the work, and eventually learn how to do the work yourself. So putting that effort in, for me, that's where my effort goes the most. If I'm consistent with doing check-ins with my parts, which might only just be one meditation a week, now that I've done some of the, I guess, heavy lifting early on and worked with some parts in a deeper way, that effort placed in that direction makes much more of a difference than me just, I don't know, focusing on exercising a lot or trying to just think positive thoughts each day. And the other point I'd like to make, which links to another video, is another video that I'll put in the link below, is around being versus doing. This trap that so many of us fall into that society has programmed us to buy into, that if I just try harder, push harder, I can achieve anything. It sounds wonderful and aspirational, and so many, motivational speakers and all sorts of people have probably, romanticize that idea that you just push harder, you try harder, and you get there. For some, maybe sheer effort can get us a good percentage of the way there. But in my experience, that usually comes at a significant cost. The effort required to continuously push past the underlying beliefs that would try to push back against our natural tendencies, create our natural tendencies, or the emotion that tries to show up to be recognized and work with, that we just deny or ignore and cover over with sheer effort and busyness. At some point it's going to come at a cost, and for some of us that will be a physical health issue that'll stop us in our tracks. If we're not listening, internally to what our system is trying to tell us and show us, it'll find its way into the body, and illness will ensue. So putting some focus, or putting your effort into being, now that's probably not quite the right wording, prioritising more moments of being during a day, a week, which can be as simple as putting your feet on the earth, watching the trees move in the breeze, focusing on the breath as you gaze out the window. Any type of a mindful experience where you're just allowing yourself to be present without an agenda, without seeking to achieve anything or do anything. That also can paradoxically make much more of a difference. I wouldn't say mindfulness on its own and choosing to come into a state of being will be enough on its own. And generally when we allow that space to just be, the subconscious stuff that needs our attention will then find its way to the surface, or find its way into your attention. You'll notice a thought pattern that just keeps repeating, and instead of pushing it away and getting frustrated with it, you get curious about it and go towards it and seek to understand why a part of you keeps playing a thought pattern. Again, coming back to anxiety, let's say you just keep finding yourself running over plans for the future. Might not even be super stressful plans. It's just this need to keep going over what's coming up in your life. It creates stress. It creates too much activity, and just being able to take the time and be curious about the part of you that's generating that, and getting to the deeper understanding, which is usually maybe just trying to protect us from the unknown, for example. Could be a reason that a planner part feels the need to be on all the time, and having gratitude for the fact that that part is only seeking to protect us, not hurt you. Form a connection with that part, show it the gratitude, but then maybe there's space for helping that part to find its way into balance, rather than having to be so switched on. But that is through showing it attention, not through ignoring it, not through covering it over with more doing. So maybe if you're stuck, maybe if you're not making the progress you'd like to make in the areas of your life that you seek to change, perhaps the effort is going in the wrong direction. The effort being on behaviour and trying to force certain thought patterns may not be where you're efforts are best served. And bringing effort or bringing priority to bringing awareness to your inner world, getting curious and connected with the different aspects of yourself that are calling out to you, and finding your way back to that core self, that you that just is here being, because that is who and what you really are. That is what you were, or who you were before the programming got to you. That you as a little child didn't have the doing as part of the agenda. That you was just seeking to experience and be. And that you still is there. That you has never left you. That self with a capital S is always patiently awaiting to be allowed to lead you through life and allowed to connect you with presence. So perhaps that's where you can place more of your effort. Thank you.